Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is ScopeSF and today I want to share with you a deck tech for a commander deck that has been, I will say, about 3.5, maybe 4 years in the making, but it hasn't really come to full fruition. It was never in a position that I really liked until I decided to revisit the deck list recently, do some upgrades, go over some of the cards that felt unnecessary and some of the cards that were too expensive to try and bring the budget down, and I ended up with this list. And this, it feels like, personally for me, this feels like a game changer for a commander. There's a long story behind this one. Basically, the idea behind this deck was when I first started playing Commander, I used to have a Narset Voltron deck. I forget what exactly that version of Narset was called. I don't know if it was Narset the Enlightened or something, but it was the Jeskai Commander with Hexproof First Strike and cast free stuff off the top of your library. And I didn't do any of the random bullcrap that Narset is infamous for. I didn't do infinite turns. I didn't do infinite combat. I didn't do anything like that. But it was still a Voltron. It was still Narset, and it was very, very scary. So when I would play that deck, which I didn't really have a choice because that ended up being my first commander deck, the results of every game were either I needed to be hated out of the game immediately, or I was left alone, mostly because people felt bad that I was consistently being hated out of the game, and I would just clean sweep the board just because that's what Narset does. And that deck did not last very long. I played it for a few games because that was the only commander deck I had, but I knew that very, very early on, I needed to disassemble that deck, practically get rid of it, and start from scratch on a new deck that did the exact opposite of what that deck was. Because the core flaw of that deck is, nowadays I could probably upgrade that Narset deck with some of the newer cards that have come out since then. And granted, we're talking about like 2013, maybe 2014 when all of this was going on. I could probably have upgraded a Narset deck like that and take it to a competitive pod. But when I was playing with friends from college back in the day, if I was playing the Narset deck, I really wasn't having fun, whether I was being hated out of the game or just clean sweeping the game. And I could tell that nobody else was having fun because they were stressing about a boogeyman on the board when they just wanted to go around, interact, and do the different crazy things that their commander decks were worth doing. So I wanted to build a deck, kind of taking that knowledge, I wanted to design a deck that was literally the polar exact opposite of what that Narset deck was. I wanted a deck that whenever somebody played it, they wouldn't be hated out of the table. They were actually encouraged to do more things and be a part of a lot of what is going on at the table. And also something that that they could consistently contribute to a game of Commander. The thing about being hated out with a Narset deck or other Voltron decks or powerful combo decks like that is when you get shut down, it does get to the point where eventually you just can't do anything, and you're just kind of sitting around waiting at the table for the game to be over without you actually being a part of it. But you can't just concede from the game because that's usually considered bad manners and whatnot. So, ultimately, needed a deck. I guess I should say I needed a deck that could do three things. I needed a deck that whenever somebody played it, they wouldn't be hated out of the game and they'd actually be encouraged to be a part of the game. 2, I wanted a deck that when players were playing it, they were consistently doing something instead of, like Simic players. They would just kind of sit there, twiddle their thumbs until eventually something happens. I wanted a deck that was a lot more engaging in that way. And then 3, I wanted a deck that, this is a little bit more of a selfish reason, but I wanted a deck that I could design that would speed up the game. Because 4-player Commander does feel like a sweet spot, but if you get, even then, it's kind of a toss-up as to how long a game can go or how much it feels like it drags on when there's 4 players. And if you're doing 5 or more players, you could just forget about it. And then with 3 players, 3 players is definitely a sweet spot, but you only have 3 players. You're not really, unless you have a small group, you're not really getting your group involved. So something that, if you could incorporate this kind of deck to a table, even as a 4-player game, it speeds the game up and encourages the other 3 players so much that it feels more like a really cracked 3-player game instead of a standard 4-player game. So eventually I designed a Kami of the Crescent Moon deck, and if we look at what the commander does, he's just a 2-blue legendary creature, 1/3. Stats don't really matter. The big thing is he costs just 2 blue. He's really cheap to get onto the board. And his text is just, at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. So instead of drawing 1 card per turn, each player is drawing 2 cards. And this is the heart and soul of what I wanted this deck to be. Because not only does it speed the game up by, as people are playing their commander decks, which are fairly fine-tuned around fairly specific cards, they don't always get to see their own power plays because they have to rely on drawing into the cards that they need to actually do what their deck is designed to do. If you're drawing multiple cards per turn, it increases the likelihood that you are going to be able to get into the pieces that you need to actually pull off a lot of the fun stuff that your deck can do. And also, let's be real, I can't explain the full psychology behind it if I'm being honest, but for whatever reason, people just love drawing cards. And even when they're drawing bad cards, I think, let's say if a player was not playing against this deck and the 3 cards on the top of their library were all land cards. For whatever reason, it feels like people are more excited to draw 3 land cards all at once, even if they only can play 1 per turn, as opposed to spending 1 or 2 turns only to realize that the top cards of your deck were just land cards and you could only play 1 per turn. Even though technically it's more land efficient to only draw 1 card per turn and all of them being land cards, people still just like drawing cards. I really don't have a full explanation for it, but kind of piggybacking off of that, I knew I wanted a deck that, the way I knew I wanted to speed up the game and encourage people to have more fun with their decks and really get to see their own decks take off is to essentially build a card draw tribal deck. And that's what I ended up building with Kami of the Crescent Moon. And I'm also going to make a little quick disclaimer here. I do believe that every commander deck should have some form of a win condition. Like, it should have a plan to win, or a definitive way to say, okay, this is how I am going to close out the game. So even though this is more of a group hug deck, there are some win conditions. You can kind of see them on screen. I'll go over them into a little bit. But this fundamentally is supposed to serve as a group hug deck. You're not playing this deck for yourself. You're playing this deck because you want other people to, not necessarily even you want other people to play for themselves, but I don't even know how to word this if I'm being honest. You're playing this deck so Not so that you can get the most out of this deck, but so that other players can get the most out of their decks. So, moving forward, just wanted to kind of set up the framework for why this deck exists, what the different cards going in here are meant to do. But all of that being said, I did do a couple of play tests for this deck, and it's really, really fun. So, aside from Kami of the Crescent Moon, we do have quite a few cards here that lead to extra card draw. Academy Lore Master essentially does the same thing as Kami of the Crescent Moon, except players could choose whether or not they draw that extra card. If they do, spells cost 2 more to cast per turn, so a little bit of a downside for choosing to draw extra cards, but there's a little bit of a give and take, and ultimately just the fact that we're consistently getting more cards that do more card draw. Honestly, I think it's worth it. Very good card to put in the deck. The Archive, I'm not even going to bother explaining. We don't even care about the top part of the card because there isn't really much life gain in this deck. But it says if you would draw a card except the first one you draw in each of your steps, draw 2 cards instead. So just more extra card draw for yourself. But the reason that there are some cards in here that only focus on us as a player drawing cards is just so that way we can get to more of the cards in our deck that allow players to draw other cards within their deck. Archmage Ascension, just really good synergy. Also kind of serves as a game closer. This really is one of the only tutors that we have in the deck. Might be one of the best tutors, honestly, but this is for when, for whatever reason, even though you're playing your turbo card draw deck and you're saying, okay, everybody draw cards, you can get to your power level more quickly, you can close out the game more quickly. Some players will still kind of hold back and drag out the game more than it needs to be. This is going to be one of the game closers where you can eventually say, okay, this is taking way too long. Now I'm going to take the initiative to close out the game, and I'm going to do that by getting the pieces that I absolutely need in order to do that. Dictator Crucifix, an enchantment that allows more players to draw more cards. Just another Kami of the Crescent Moon that we have in the deck. Pretty good overall. Font of Mythos, kind of like a cracked Kami of the Crescent Moon. Instead of just with this card, instead of doing 1 card draw per turn, you draw 3 cards per turn. Just from the 2 additional ones. And if you have the Kami out, then you're drawing 4 cards, which is insane. But, yeah, Font of Mythos, very good card draw there. Forced Fruition. You can go without this card if you really want to. But this kind of contributes towards a mill strategy where you're helping players dig through their deck much more quickly than they actually would realize. So even though you are really, really helping them draw into their primary win conditions, which isn't even a downside, that's kind of what this deck is designed to do. If players are not careful around this card and they don't get rid of this card early, they'll be surprised at how thin their library gets by even like turn 8, 9, or 10 if the game really goes that far. Gear per Orrery. This is... I know that this is really in here for more of a catch-up mechanic, because this really doesn't draw extra cards. It just prevents players from having... it just prevents players from top decking. And I think that's important because, again, one of the purposes of this deck is to make sure that everybody's able to do something. If players kind of just dump out their hands and they're waiting on just top decks for... in order to make their next plays work, I really don't think that's fun. So, Gear per Orrery, really good for Like I said, just as a catch-up mechanic, so nobody's really relying on, maybe I'll get the next proper card, maybe I won't. Horn of Greed. Everybody's playing lands. It is the resource for Magic the Gathering, and commander decks that are properly built can consistently play one land per turn. So the fact that we have a card that allows players to draw more cards just as a reward for proper deck building, absolutely wonderful. Howling Mine. Yes, there is some awkward untap potential with something like if you were running Urza as the commander, the mono blue Modern Horizons Urza. We are not doing that because that is just ridiculously powerful and way too expensive for what this deck is trying to do. But as far as it really matters, when we have Howling Mine in play, it is another Kami of the Crescent Moon, even down to the mana cost. The original Jace Beleren Planeswalker, he's just here for the +2 ability. Each player draws a card. It's another Temple Bell, which is also in the deck. Just very efficient card draw for every player. If it gets later into the game, you can use his -1 just so that only you draw a card, or you could have only a specific player draw a card. But you're really never using his -10 unless it's absolutely a closing finisher against somebody who was abusing Force Fruition without really thinking about it. But this ultimate is much better in like your traditional 60 card formats as opposed to a 100 card commander format. But still absolutely worth it. 3 mana for a Planeswalker so each player could draw 2 cards as he's getting bigger and bigger. Absolutely good value. Then, of course, you have Anime Jace. If you don't know the reference as to why it's called Anime Jace, just look up the Japanese version of this card. It is absolutely wonderful. Serves more as a win condition. As this is probably the most fair that the Thassa's Oracle or Laboratory Maniac kind of mechanics were ever printed on a card. Because Planeswalkers are high-profile threats, so they're more likely to be taken out than a Laboratory Maniac or a Thassa's Oracle, both of which are more susceptible to creature removal anyway. But either way, you could say that this is more of a win condition card, but he is in here so that way you can also consistently draw cards. And maybe he serves as a game finisher, but will allow him to just be a game finisher as he is. Teferi's Ageless Insight. If you would draw a card except the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. So, of course, we're going to be drawing a lot of cards off of this with just having Kami or Howling Mine on the field, and essentially serves as another copy of, I think it was the Archive? Yeah, so Teferi's Ageless Insight, just really, really efficient card draw just for you, but still worth putting in the deck. Temple Bell, tap it, each player draws a card. Really efficient card draw for everybody. Something that we like to see within this deck. And then Well of Ideas. When it enters the battlefield, you get to draw 2 cards. Great. More importantly, at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card as well. And then, of course, it also lets you draw 2 additional cards instead. So it's like a Kami of the Crescent Moon that more benefits you. But realistically, this is primarily in here for, at the beginning of each other player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. So, of course, we got all the card draw. Then we have some other cards here that mostly serve as win conditions. So I'll make this one quick. Ebony Elm Natsuke, Iron Maiden, Miser's Cage, and Skull Cage all essentially do the same thing. They burn players out for little bits of chip damage if they have more than 7 cards in their hand. They're worded differently. But basically for players drawing cards and having more cards in their hand, we got 4 cards here that will consistently punish that. Then you have Psychic Corrosion, as players are drawing more cards, they are milling more cards, so you could double down on a mill win condition. Similar to that, Psychosis Crawler, whenever a player draws a card, whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. You can consistently be drawing 3 or 4 cards per turn with this deck, so just having a Psychosis Crawler out there, not only is he going to be a big beefy finisher, because this guy could very realistically get up to a 13/13, but the fact that he could really well end up doing 3, 4, even 5 damage to each opponent per one of your turns, especially in combination with something like Teferi's Insight or the Alma Mater's Archive. Psychosis Crawler is kind of a sleeper all-star in this deck that is definitely not worth ignoring. Otherwise, just some high-value blue creature cards. Stormtide Leviathan kind of serves as a ultimately no creatures can attack except for my beefy 8/8 that is also unblockable just because of how things are kind of worded with this deck. Honestly, for just very good value, very high value blue creature that can close out the game. Inkwell Leviathan, kind of the same deal. Very highly costed blue creature, but it has trample. Can consistently be unblockable if other players have islands, and it has Shroud. So yes, you can't target it with anything, but there really isn't anything to target it with in this deck. Like, we're not running equipment, we're not running auras, we're not running anything that would buff creatures. So just having a 7/11 Shroud, trample, potentially island walk, just very high value on a creature. And then of course we got the boogeyman to this deck, Jinkataxis. Yes, I know that this card is a bit of a taboo because of how powerful he just is. Not only are you drawing 7 cards right off the bat just by playing this big creature, but also reducing your opponent's hand sizes. So if you play this properly as a finisher against like a specific opponent, like if it's just you were left alone for the game and you had one clear winner and you happen to have this card, you could play this out to make sure that they discard their hand. They can only play 1 card per turn, which is the card they draw that turn, or otherwise they would never be able to play a card per turn. And then you just have a ridiculous amount of cards that you get to choose from to close out the game. This is actually a table turner. This card alone can turn it from, okay, it's one powerful deck versus a group hug deck, into, okay, you have a powerful deck that can no longer do anything against what we thought was a group hug deck that can now do everything. So play this at your own risk. This is essentially you declaring that you want to try to win the game, but at some point maybe you absolutely have to. And I don't think that running this card is one of the worst things in the world, even in a casual setting. Because, heaven forbid, you're just playing one card that you're trying to close out the game with more definitively than others. If other players weren't able to win the game by how many cards they were able to draw from within their own deck, I think it's okay to run, one specific card that will close everything out. Otherwise, you got some counterspells. If opponents play things that you really don't want them to play, or if you find, this is how I would usually play counterspells like this, if one person is absolutely dominating and it feels like nobody's having fun at the table, there's nothing wrong with targeting that specific dominating opponent to prevent them from getting even further ahead and just snowballing into a win more and allowing other players to catch up, including yourself if you absolutely had to. Same thing for just basic removal. You got your Vapor Snags, Pongify, and Rapid Hybridization, basically the same thing. Destroying specific creatures. You got some bounce spells that are pretty effective and efficient in what they do. just for general removal of things on the board that are really, really hurting. Some protection just for yourself. These are just here to allow you to stay in the game longer. Nothing really particular here, if I'm being honest. Then we have a section of cards just for no maximum hand size. Of course, with you being able to draw a lot of cards, not just from what you have in your deck, but also just as your commander, it really doesn't feel that great to draw all these cards, and you see a lot of different things that you know you can use for later turns, or that you want to keep around in case of emergencies, but then you have to discard everything just because of a hand size. With how many cards you're drawing, I think it's absolutely worth to eventually try and get, a couple of cards that, even if they just specifically say you have no maximum hand size, like heaven forbid, we have Reliquary Tower, which is a land that taps for a colorless, but it just does that. And then we have Spellbook, an artifact that doesn't cost anything, and all it is you have no maximum hand size. If something like Spellbook is just worth running in this deck, then, of course, looking at some of the other cards that also allow you to just, no maximum hand size, really effective, really good, absolutely worth running. And then, of course, you also have Nezahal Primal Tide and, give me a second, Triskai Decaphile. Yes, they're primarily in here just for no maximum hand size, but they also have value as alternative win conditions. So, and let's be real, there's a little bit of a difference between winning with Triskai Decaphile and winning with Thassa's Oracle when it comes to alternative win conditions. So, pretty good value there. A little bit of mana ramp. Of course, you got your Thran Dynamos, Soul Rings, Mind Stones. Everybody knows about those. Cage Sun and Gauntlet of Power, just to kind of double up on your basic lands. So that way, if you're trying to close out the game, and you want to cast your Jin-Gitaxias, you want to cast your Stormtide Leviathan, then Cage Sun and Gauntlet of Power are eventually going to help you do that. If you have more of a budget and you want to do an upgrade to this deck, you could take out the Sky Diamond and add Extraplanar Lens. And then you could take out the 30 islands and replace them with 30 snow-covered islands, because you could do the Snowland Extraplanar Lens combo. But Extraplanar Lens itself was really, really expensive as far as dollar amount cost. And on top of that, the extra money that you would need to get snow-covered islands as opposed to just your basic islands, I ignored it because, one thing, I didn't really think the deck needed it, and I was concerned about budget. But that is another option you could go down. And then lastly, one of the big reasons that this deck is as budget friendly as it is, yes, we have a Reliquary Tower as a land, but that it really is only in here just for the no maximum hand size. Considering we're a mono blue deck that doesn't need to worry about color fixing, that doesn't necessarily need to worry about ramp, yada yada yada, we're just running 30 basic islands. And that's it. That's the deck. Very budget friendly. I don't know if you can see down here. If you're buying on Card Kingdom, a little bit over $200. I'd say you're probably looking about, I don't know, depending on condition, how picky you are with condition, how picky you are with the version that was printed, or the edition that it was printed in, might be a little bit higher. You're probably looking at about $240, $250 after taxes, fees, shipping, everything like that. But if we're saying that on a high-end $250 deck, for a deck that anybody can play, whether they're a veteran or a new player, that allows them to stay in the game and consistently feel like they are a part of the game, and to also help games go faster, just in case it feels like a game is dragging on too long, that is 100% worth it, in my opinion. Of course, value is subjective. You have to decide if it's worth it for you or not. But in the event that you feel like your play group could use a deck like this to show up every now and again, that's why I'm sharing the deck list. and I really encourage people to take a look at it, see if they would like it. But to also help with that decision, I am actually going to show some gameplay. So just give me a few moments and we'll hop into a game real quick to show what this deck can do. Alright, so loading into the game here, we have Saint Anger running Tawnos the Toymaker. We have Lissy running Shessra Death's Whisper. Never even seen this card before. And we have Orican running Grist the Hungering Tide. So, looking at our hand, if we had more lands, I think it would be better. So we're going to mull. Ideally, your primary keep is to get 2 islands. So that way you could get out Kami the Crescent Moon as soon as possible. You'd be surprised at how consistent you can actually do that, even with one lander like this, because you're not really going to be playing anything on turn 1, so you essentially have 2 draw steps to find your second island. So don't be afraid of keeping a 1-lander. Even if you keep a 1-lander, you're consistently getting the Kami out. Saint Anger really looking for the power hand there. Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to yield until my turn here. Be a little bit nice. Okay, sweet. So we got the second island that we were looking for. For right now, I think the best thing to do would just be do that. And, you know, I said normally we don't have a turn 1 play, but getting out Wizard's Class just so that way we have no maximum hand size, pretty good. And then we'll just yield until here because we are a blue deck that does not have any untapped mana. So we'll just, we're not going to pretend that we have any instants. I love that Caperna Forest. The Capenna card art is so good for the full art lands. It's amazing how even they were able to take something like the gruesome death and decay of a swamp or the overpowering kind of like grandiose nature of a forest and translate them even to like in a city environment. Who's that artist? Matteo Bacchini, I think. Yeah, props off to you. Excellent job with the card art there. Alright, so next turn. Do what we do best. We're just going to cast our commander. Get everybody some card draw. And let the fun begin. I don't remember why this is in the deck. I don't think it matters. Alright, reassembling skeleton. Not bad, not bad. Okay. Okay, pretty good value there. Drawing a bunch more cards, even though you're already going to be doing that just with Kami. What's this one do again? Copy it. Artifact. Okay, yeah, so he's the guy who's a Toymaker. Well, yeah, okay, Tawnos the Toymaker is a Toymaker, of course. I'm guessing this guy wants to do Birds and Beast Tribal. Makes sense. Ooh, okay, now we have some options. I think what I want to do... Honestly... I think I just level 2 this. Draw 2 more cards. Yeah, and then... Oops. And then just kind of pass turn. Bruh. Yield. I'm not attacking with Kami. Also, you have to excuse me, I don't know the Magic Online shortcuts. And I'm not going to pretend to. That's pretty good. For a deck that's probably looking into a lot of card draw and a lot of lands there. Wait. If it ain't... That card was milled. Wait. Ooh, Devouring Swarm. I love that card. Pretty much an all-star in my Commander deck. And my mono black budget version of Persist deck. Which might as well be the same thing. Vampire Nighthawk and is going to get the Viridian Longbow. Not right away, but... Yeah, this is essentially kind of like what I'm talking about. With how Lizzie here was able to consistently draw a bunch of the cards that they were looking for just with Kami. They were able to get into their Viridian Longbow and Vampire Nighthawk pretty early. Now, granted, I'll give them credit, they did keep the hand with the Viridian Longbow. What's happening? To be sure, but being able to draw into the Vampire Nighthawk, pretty solid. Oh man. Okay, here's how I'm doing this. So you have 4 lands Gonna tap 2 of them for the Thought Vessel. And then we're gonna play a Temple Bell with our remainders. And then everybody draws a card. And then just yield until the next turn. Next turn, I don't really think I have any plans. I think all I want to do is, if I draw another land, literally a land of any type, I would spend 2 to play the... I'd spend like 1 and the Thought Vessel to get the Sky Diamond, and then the other 4 into the Gerber Orrery. Yeah, I should really pay attention to what's going on here. Interesting. This guy's straight up going Insect Tribal, and I am down for it. Props to you, Orican, for interesting deck. I'll level with you, Chief. I really hope they don't... Like, if they equip the longbow to the Nighthawk, I completely understand. I'm expecting that's what's happening right now. Yep. Please don't hurt the Kami. He good boy. Okay, he's using it defensively. Interesting. Okay, yeah, so we got some bird tribal, I guess. And they really don't like that Grist. Okay, so just destroying one of the birds, no big deal. They trade. It is what it be, what it do. Alright, sweet. That's pretty much what we were looking for. So, we're just going to keep going down the group hug method of playing. And just consistently play cards that everybody would like to see. And I'm not being strategic with Temple Bell here. I'm just like, you know, it's untapped, which means I'm allowed to tap it, which means people draw more cards. That's it. That's all I got. Okay. Oh, sacrifices are permanent. That's baller. And Lizzie was having none of that. Fantastic. Good on you, Lizzie. I can imagine a lot of those are... Yeah. Yeah, Lizzie made an enemy. Going down to 28, though. No big deal. Hatch Nantucket. I don't think I've seen that one before. A part of me is a little bit bummed that I'm not getting, like, the real, like, extra card draw. Well, actually, now what I could do, I can play Force Fruition. You know what? Yeah, that's gonna be something. We're gonna do that. Since I know we have the mana, what is the 6? We got 5, 6. Perfect. And then I could even float one for rapid hybridization if I absolutely wanted to. Probably not going to. I really don't care. I respect that this guy really doesn't like that Grist, but I'm really surprised I'm still at 40 life by now. Although, I guess, granted, Ori's only at 37 and Anger's only at 39, so... Not much of a bloodbath game, honestly. Lizzie got hit in retaliation, that was about it. Alright, cool. We'll do Spellbook just because. It's funny. And let's get this show on the road. Alright, let this go through. Let this go through. Let's have some fun. Yeah. Yield And go. This is exciting. Ah, come on, you coward. Cast a spell. Draw 7 cards! This absolute Giga Chad used his demonic tutor to draw 8 cards. Props to you, Orkin. You know how to play with my deck. Of cards. My deck of cards. Of Magic the Gathering. Variety. Yeah, by the way, you're still casting a spell. One thing about this deck that does kind of slow things down, mostly specifically on Magic Online, is he's going to take a bit to discard from a minimum of 22 cards down to 7. And I think he's casting another spell. Yeah. Ooh, I like it. I like it a lot. So he's effectively not milling himself out. Ooh. Zulaport Cutthroat. Wait, how do you... where's he getting the sacrifice outlet? Okay, doesn't have a sacrifice outlet yet. Bro went through like a third of his library just because of Force Fruition. Let's go. You know what? Sure. I'll take it. Oh, what? Why would you concede? We were just getting to the good part. I don't remember Saint Anger's board, but I do think he had enough mana to, like, if he played like 1 or 2 cheap spells to draw 7 or 14 cards, then he would have found something that he really would have liked to play. Like, yes, or he just had a super... Oh. Or he discards himself and then he discards Saint Anger. Fantastic. Yes, Ori had an explosive turn, but I think Anger could have also gotten a similarly explosive turn. Of course, there's always going to be the problem in Magic the Gathering where, like, destroy enchantment. Which one's he destroying? Please don't be the Force Fruition. I was having fun. Aww. Oh, okay. Well, that's pretty good, actually. Good way to destroy the Grist. So, but yeah, like, before the game really wraps out, this is essentially what I want this deck to do. Like, Ori was running a Grist deck, and I know that Grist is one of those stupid broken cards from Modern Horizons, or Modern Horizons 2, or whichever one that set symbol is. But let's be real, he was running Insect Tribal. I mean, yeah, I guess he has a Demonic Tutor and some other pretty good cards, but consistently, like, with how many tokens he's been getting, he really is just running like an Insect Tribal deck. How often does this deck explode as much as it has been for this game if it weren't for me just doing, like, the whole card draw thing? I'll be honest, I don't know. Ooh. How do I want to do this? So I have 1, 2, 7 mana. I could run Maishin. Or Maishin. I don't think I want to, though. You know, I think what I'll do is I'll do one more turn of Ageless Insight. And then I'll just throw out Ascension. And then each player draws a card. Play a land for turn. And then I do have mana for either Pongify or Rapid Hybridization. Always yes, and always yield. And then yes. Each player chooses a creature type. Okay, so I only ever had one creature, and it's a spirit. What is the funniest creature type? Antelope's a good one. Assembly Worker's a good one. Aurochs is a balloon. That's the answer. I shall have back all of my lost balloons. Kami of the Crescent balloons. I just yielded to everything, right? Yeah, okay. So I'm just gonna let all the triggers resolve. We'll let Ori blow up the board. He's earned it. I mean, I'm gonna be fair, though. He has 51 minutes to blow up the board. He put so many +1/+1 counters on the Bloodline Pretenders. He's just like, Magic's just like, I'm done with this. Alright. So how big is the Pretender? Wait. Okay, that's fine, but where's he getting the sacrifice outlet? Yeah, he has the Devouring Swarm. Plus the Zulaport Cutthroat. Except this guy's actually playing fair Magic. Oh yeah, we also lose 25 life. Bruh, I was looking at that graveyard. Bruh, stop. Want to see... Bruh. Alright, each opponent loses X life. He has 85 life. Oh, nah. Let him have this, see how much damage he was able to do. So 5. Well, whatever the negative is, we'll just subtract 5 from that, and we know that's how much damage he did. If it even shows me. Negative 479 damage plus the 25 he did. Yeah, this guy did over 500 damage to me in one turn. Bruh. Yeah. That's what this deck was meant to do. I don't know what Ori was saying or thinking or whatever on the other side of the screen, but I bet he was having one heck of a time. I know I was.